June 24, 2025, 05:12 a.m. The radar screens aboard a Russian Raptor-class patrol boat flickered with urgent warnings. Multiple unidentified surface contacts, fast, low, and converging, had just appeared out of nowhere in the northern Black Sea. The crew jolted into motion. This wasn't a drill. In seconds, the ship's Aegis-integrated CIWS came online, warning flares shot skyward, and electronic jammers activated across all decks. But it was already too late. Over the gray horizon, 8 Ukrainian Magra Vi-5 naval drones surged in formation, small, fast, and deadly. Each one packed enough explosives to cripple the vessel. No missiles, no warning, just pure silence until the first one hit. For the Russian sailors, this was no longer a routine patrol, it was a brutal test of survival. The ship's engines roared, smoke poured from midship, and sailors shouted over alarms as counter-drone turrets tried to keep pace. But the swarm moved like water, reforming, redirecting, overwhelming defenses with coordinated precision. This wasn't a skirmish. This was strategic warfare, rewritten in real time by machines. In just 9 minutes, the battle turned modern naval doctrine on its head. The patrol boat was left adrift, its hull cracked, its crew battered, but alive. And from this sudden chaos emerged a question that every navy in the world would now have to answer. What happens when the enemy doesn't arrive with a fleet, but as a silent swarm? June 24, 2025, 4:58 a.m. The Black Sea mirrored a steel-gray sky as the Russian patrol boat Raptor-class Project 316U advanced steadily north of Novorossiysk. It was a routine escort mission, and the mood aboard was calm, even mundane. The sea was flat, winds light, radar pings came back clean. On the command deck, the air felt almost lazy. Sailors in black naval uniforms moved through their checks with muscle memory. Coffee steamed in metal mugs. The CIWS turrets were powered but idle. The patrol boat had done this route dozens of times. Down in the operations room, the mood was no different. The radar operator, head down over his screen, traced the usual arcs of fishing trawlers and cargo ships. A junior officer reviewed watch rotations. No alerts, no threats. Communications from the nearby escort destroyer were typical. Maintenance codes, weather confirmations, fuel levels. The commanding officer leaned over the table map, hands behind his back. His posture reflected years of confidence in predictable operations. But at 05:12, that fragile sense of normalcy cracked. A sudden cluster of returns appeared on radar. Small, fast, low to the surface. Multiple contacts, the radar officer called out sharply, bearing 045. Range closing. No transponders. A beat of silence. Then alarms sounded across the ship. The commanding officer snapped upright. "Battle stations," he yelled. "Deploy ECM. Warm up CIWS." Coffee cups were dropped. Safety covers pulled off weapon systems. Boots slammed metal. Routine was gone. Within 60 seconds, the first visual confirmation hit the deck. 8 Magura V5 Ukrainian sea drones broke over the horizon in formation, small, low-slung, and fast. The drones split into tactical pairs, skimming just above the waterline. The lead pair went starboard, 2 more angled toward the bow. The CIWS tracking motors screamed into life. Targeting lights locked, searchlights swept forward, illuminating the silver surf. "Drone signatures confirmed," said the systems officer, voice flat under pressure. "Unmanned surface vehicles. Explosive load likely." The captain gave orders without hesitation. "Engage countermeasures. Launch signal jamming. Prep fire solutions." Electronic warfare pods began to emit broad-spectrum pulses. Interference flared across the surface. But the drones didn't flinch. They were autonomous, pre-programmed, and designed for swarm assault. On the command deck, the tension was razor-thin. Gun crews rotated the 14.5mm heavy machine guns. CIWS spun and fired. Bright tracers stitched the sky, but the drones veered unpredictably. One was hit, splintering into foam and metal, but another darted through. Then came the first explosion. A thunderous blast erupted near the starboard engine room. The hull groaned. Deck plates vibrated under boots. Lights flickered. A second drone hit moments later, closer to midship. Flames and black smoke bloomed upward. The crew shouted over alarms. Bulkhead doors slammed shut. Internal comms crackled. In the space of 3 minutes, the patrol boat had gone from silence to siege. Water began entering the aft compartment. The captain ordered emergency sealing. But before the damage control teams could respond, the drones were already circling for another pass. And this time, they weren't aiming for propulsion, they were aiming for the kill. 05:15 a.m. The second wave hit without warning. The Magura Va-5 drones, having circled back, attacked in brutal synchronized patterns. One pair surged toward the stern. A second pair aimed for the starboard engine room, where the hull was already compromised. On deck, the crew braced. The CIWS had fired dozens of rounds, but clips emptied mid-run. The heavy machine guns spat tracers, but rounds fell short or overshot. Jamming systems operated at full throttle. Smoke from the fire below drifted into the superstructure. Sailors coughed through searing air. The patrol boat was taking real damage. Inside the engine room, alarms wailed. Pressure gauges spun off scale as seawater filled compartments. The engineering officer barked orders. Seal compartment Bravo 3. Shut down starboard engines. Engage portable pumps. Crew in firefighting suits rushed below deck, their footsteps echoing in damp corridors. One pump failed. Another clicked and spat. Water rose above ankle level. Sparks flew from damaged wiring. The boat pitched, groaned, and stuttered with each wave. The hull braced against a swelling Caribbean swell. The Black Sea had turned treacherous. Back on deck, another Magura struck the stern. A deafening boom. Deck plating crumpled. The aft CIWS tower tilted awkwardly. A sailor lost his footing, crashing near the damaged cradle. Blood mixed with hydraulic fluid on the deck. His mate helped him crawl toward the medbay. Meanwhile, the captain stood firm under an open-weather mast, voice booming. Evacuate aft section. Get damage control parties to the stern. Counter-drone turret ready. But the drones kept coming. Radar tracked their low profiles like sharks circling the hull. Smoke and fire painted the canvas of the battlefield. Deck crews launched handheld jammers while the Aegis-guided CIWS swung toward each target. But Magura drones seemed designed to swarm and overwhelm. Even when one drone was struck down, two more took its place in seconds. At 05:18, the turning point, the captain made the call. Order abandon ship. His voice cut through alarms and smoke. Life rafts were deployed. Crew members climbed down ropes and into floating crafts against the sloshing oil. Some bent to assist injured mates. Fear and training merged. Each move was urgent and precise. Meanwhile, the patrol boat groaned under fire. Another drone exploded near the bow, blowing a fiery blossom of water onto the deck. The blast knocked out railings. The hull cracked a fresh wound. The remaining crew slipped into rafts as the last CIWS turret misfired and jammed. The drones circled once more, then pulled back, as if satisfied. By 05:24 a.m., 9 minutes into the attack, the harbor tug arrived. It hailed radio silence. Its crew approached cautiously, looking for survivors and debris. The hulk of the Raptor class floated listless, fire bubbling below decks, dark smoke rising. The remaining crew watched from rafts slick with oil, hearts pounding. Though heavily damaged, the patrol boat did not sink. The tug attached wires and began towing, but the mission had ended in chaos. Emergency sirens aboard the tug mixed with distant echoes of battle. And as dawn broke fully, a battered vessel trailed toward port, a symbol of asymmetric naval warfare. The first major drone strike in the Black Sea had shifted naval doctrine. Electronic systems had failed to counter swarming surface drones. Lives had been saved by training and discipline, but only just. The patrol boat lived, but its vulnerabilities were exposed. As the survivors drifted behind, the question hung in salty air: how to defend against an enemy that doesn't need a human soul to strike. After the drones pulled back, the survivors remained adrift in life rafts, oil-slick water lapping at their frames. The tug had to keep distance. Flare guns traced arcs across the sky to signal rescuers. On board the crippled patrol boat, smoke billowed from midship, curling through superstructure like a wounded beast. Damage control teams scrambled against time and tide. Inside, Engineer Sergeant Ivanov shouted orders over the roar. Get hoses to Bravo 3, shut off the starboard fuel lines, risk of ignition. Firefighting crews, coated in foam and carbon dust, advanced into the smoke-choked corridor. Every step was precarious. Hot pipes bled steam. Wiring sparks popped. The sea pumped cold water into fractured seams, fighting fire with flooding. It became a brutal battle between flames and seawater. Miles away, in the shelter of the escorting destroyer, medical teams prepared for casualties. Chief Petty Officer Markin walked toward the small landing craft, ready to transfer the wounded. He wasn't sure how many would need aid. Reports had been chaotic. Bodies had tumbled on deck. Limbs had been scalded. Shock and burns were likely. Each sailor counted. Back on the Raptor's deck, the aft section was a scene of controlled chaos. Sailors braced steel braces, tightened hydraulic rams, sealed bulkheads. Sparks flew where metal met metal, welding arcs slicing through hot air. Each action was precise, each voice steady. This wasn't improvisation, it was drilled skill. Below deck, in the medbay shelter in place, wounded feet soaked in saline-soaked bandages. A sailor with a shrapnel wound stared at a porthole, watching oil-streaked waves. Another gripped the edge of his cot, trying to breathe past chest pain. Medics whispered, "Stay with us. We'll patch you up." Fear glistened in bloodshot eyes. 10 sailors were injured, 3 critical, 7 moderate. 2 were trapped briefly inside Bravo 3 before rescue teams cut through bulkheads. 11 others were unhurt but exhausted, faces pale, muscles trembling. Camaraderie held them upright. They shared water, reassurances, and whispered encouragement. None spoke of fear, but everyone felt it. Outside, tug crews and destroyer sailors worked together to stabilize the listing hull. Tow lines tightened, fire hoses snaked aboard, water sprayed against flames. A lull fell over the scene as tug and destroyer brought the patrol boat under control, yet smoke still churned above midship. The captain paced on deck, silent, staring at the horizon. His jaw was tight. He watched survivors pass loose gear, life jackets, and medical packs to destroyer hands. He thought of the sailors who fired CIWS and jammers, of those who welded steel frames, of the medics working in darkness. He felt pride, sharp, painful, and sorrow. War tests metal and men. Here, in the aftermath, human cost became clear. Technical systems faltered, but so did physical bodies. Machines coped. Humans survived. For now. Then came the orders. Return to port under escort. Prepare statements. Begin forensic analysis. Rebuild or write off. The survivors watched as the patrol boat trailed behind the destroyer and tug, smoke still rising like a wounded animal's breath. They had fought and won control, but Mother Sea had scars to remember. As the vessel headed home, a quiet question echoed in every mind. If this was only a patrol boat, what would happen next when a frigate or a cruiser took its place? Sunlight had strengthened by the time the crippled Raptor-class patrol boat limped under tow toward port. Yet its significance stretched far beyond that single vessel. Within hours of the attack, naval analysts across the region absorbed the footage, radar logs, and rescue reports, all telling the same stark truth. Small, unmanned surface drones had neutralized a modern patrol boat with brutal efficiency. It was no longer a local incident. It became a signal. On the destroyer escort's bridge, the intelligence officer monitored satellite feeds and open-source tracking. "This changes everything," she said quietly. Swarm tactics, surface drone strikes, were entering a new phase. Behind her, tactical charts flickered with patrol zones being reassessed. Fleets reorganized in real time. Convoys now zigzagged farther from shorelines. Destroyers increased patrol distances, and drones were redeployed not just offensively, but for reconnaissance. Command centers scrambled to adapt. Electronic warfare divisions initiated urgent reconfiguration of ECM arrays to detect piercing signatures of Magura-level threats. CIWS systems received firmware upgrades, and operator drills were intensified. Torpedo boats were repurposed for rapid interception. Defense contractors received emergency calls. Build stronger counter-drone systems. Scale up R&D on laser-based point defenses. Establish drone hunting task forces. By midday, multiple war game sessions were underway, simulating next-generation naval combat scenarios. In Kiev, drone program officers debriefed. "It worked exactly as designed," remarked a veteran UAV specialist. The swarm overwhelmed them. The boat had no time to regroup. They analyzed each frame, timing, velocity, evasion patterns, countermeasure delays. They shared the data with allied navies via encrypted channels. The success of Magura V5 drones sent new validation across NATO intelligence forums. The dawn after the attack saw a wave of classified messages exchanges, pushing doctrine shifts that would ripple across navies globally. Back at sea, Russian naval commanders convened in haste. They recognized the stark lessons. Traditional naval assets, patrol boats, corvettes, frigates were vulnerable. Swarm attacks using low signatures could bypass radars and jammed areas. The new paradigm demanded layered defense, multi-spectrum sensors, integrated AI to track fast-moving targets, remote control override options, decoys designed specifically for surface drones. Russia ordered upgrades for its Black Sea fleet. Workshops and debriefs were scheduled. Simulators were programmed. Exercises focused on small drone incursions, electronic saturation zones, and precision reaction drills. By evening, naval postures had rippled throughout the region. The United States, watching closely, accelerated counter-drone task group deployments on carriers and amphibious readiness groups. Australian, British, and Indian navies flagged reconnaissance vessels to test Magura identification routines. Even merchant shipping coordinated with naval forces to create drone exclusion zones during coastal transits. The era of unguarded passage was over. For crew on that patrol boat, life would never be the same. Shipboard manuals were rewritten. Command decks equipped with drone detection pods. Simulation rooms trained crews on drone engagement. The national narrative shifted. Not every enemy wears a uniform. As smoke faded from the hull, a statement echoed from Naval Command. Surface drone swarms are no longer tomorrow's threat. They are today's battlefield. This realization would drive naval strategy for years to come. The next time a Magura-class attack occurs, it will meet systems and minds prepared to respond. But the world learned its lesson. The age of silent, unmanned sea dogs is here. By the next dawn, Naval Command centers from Istanbul to Sevastopol were abuzz. Intelligence reports flagged the Magura V5 as the spearhead of a new asymmetric threat. Briefings noted that Ukraine's drone program had passed a critical threshold, not one-off tactical use, but proven operational capability. Regional militaries scrambled to update defense measures and diplomatic channels. Conversations began in secured NATO talks, in unofficial maritime safety teleconferences, and in corridor whispers at Black Sea headquarters. Ukraine, emboldened, didn't stay silent. Social media released footage of Magura swarms in action. Analysts dissected it publicly. Angles of attack, jamming failure, trace vulnerabilities. A narrative built quickly. This is how small drones redefined sea power. It triggered two immediate ripple effects. Civilian shipping companies began rerouting vessels farther offshore, and insurance rates spiked for any ship near contested zones. Blacklisted areas grew around Ukrainian coastal waters. Satellite surveillance intensified. On the Russian side, a flurry of activity followed. Naval leadership issued new drill orders for escort groups, focusing specifically on anti-swarm protocols. Surface-to-air missiles were repurposed to test against drones. Laser point defense systems were fast-tracked. Patrol routines changed. No longer hugging coastlines, no more rigid lines. Camouflaged radar pods were mounted on frigates. Sonar buoys were tested for surface detection imaging. Internally, naval academies rewrote training manuals. A new generation of unmanned surface threats meant new doctrines, and fast. NATO listened closely. Warships along the eastern Mediterranean began deploying experimental drone jamming kits. British Type 23 frigates received RCGIS add-ons. Turkish corvettes tested counter-drone laser prototypes. Meanwhile, regional partners held joint exercises titled Black Shield 2025 and Sea Guardian, emphasizing swarm defense and interlocking EW tactics. A clear message formed. Any nation deploying Magura-class drones would face coalition-level countermeasures instantly. The pressure escalated diplomatically, too. Greece lodged formal protests about drones near its waters. Romania increased patrols in its exclusive economic zone. Turkey signaled interest in hosting a counter-drone naval summit. Commercial hubs like Odessa and Batumi began coordinating with navies to enforce no-sail buffers during military operations. The air was thick with uncertainty and determination. In under 72 hours, the single drone strike had triggered a full regional escalation. What began as a patrol boat engagement had unfolded into a strategic shift. A message echoed across maritime channels. The age of naval swarms is here, and no fleet will ignore it. 3 days after the attack, a classified briefing was held aboard the U.S. 6th Fleet flagship in Naples. Naval commanders, drone warfare analysts, and cyber defense officers gathered in a steel-walled operations room. On the screen, slow-motion drone footage, intercepted Russian naval transmissions, satellite images of the damaged Raptor-class boat. A single conclusion unified them. Drone warfare at sea was no longer theoretical. It was operational, effective, and evolving fast. This wasn't just a Ukrainian victory, a U.S. Navy commander said. This was a shift in global threat perception. The drone assault had not only exposed vulnerabilities in Russian naval doctrine, but also highlighted universal gaps across fleets worldwide. Limited sensor coverage for surface drones, over-reliance on radar, and underprepared counter-swarm tactics. Even the U.S. Navy, with its advanced fleet, was updating protocols. By week's end, warships from the Mediterranean to the Indo-Pacific reconfigured alert routines. Autonomous sensor nets were expanded. New drone alert procedures were tested aboard destroyers. Aircraft carriers initiated exercises against simulated Magura-type threats. Laser tracking modules once reserved for missile defense were now assigned to low-surface targets. In Ukraine, engineers worked day and night. New variants of Magura were in development, faster with adaptive guidance and harder-to-jam systems. Their goal was clear: saturation. Deliver more drones than a vessel could detect or destroy. The Raptor-class patrol boat incident had become more than a skirmish. It was a revelation. And in the fog of tomorrow's conflict, the battlefields would be blue, unmanned, and everywhere. 3 days after the drone attack, aboard the USS Mount Whitney in Naples, the U.S. 6th Fleet convened a high-level closed-door meeting. Inside the steel-paneled Combat Intelligence Center, a dozen top naval commanders, drone warfare strategists, and cyber defense officers gathered. The room buzzed with tension. Satellite images of the damaged Raptor-class patrol boat filled one screen. On another, heat maps tracked swarm paths. The footage replayed the Magura V5s hitting with chilling precision. No one spoke for a full minute. Rear Admiral Chandler finally broke the silence. "Gentlemen," he said, "this wasn't an incident. This was a battlefield preview." Across Allied navies, that message hit hard. Command protocols were reevaluated. Fleet positioning doctrines were rewritten. Threat matrices once built around hypersonic missiles were now rewritten to include small, near-invisible, AI-guided drones capable of penetrating close-range defenses. The new enemy was not loud. It didn't flash on radar. It didn't give off infrared heat like a missile. It was silent, small, and intelligent. The U.S. Navy immediately launched Operation Silent Sentinel, a fleet-wide reclassification of unmanned threats. Destroyers began outfitting laser optic spotters on bow stations. Literal combat ships tested underwater acoustic nets to detect drone wake trails. Engineers upgraded CIWS software to prioritize multiple surface signatures, not just aerial threats. NATO coordination centers in Norfolk and Brussels started sharing electronic warfare data in real time. The Magura swarm's success triggered emergency drills from the Black Sea to the Arctic. Even navies in the Pacific, Japan, South Korea, and Australia adjusted their defensive programming to model Ukrainian-style saturation assaults. Meanwhile, back in Ukraine, the drone engineers weren't resting. If anything, they accelerated. The Magura V5 wasn't just a weapon, it was a blueprint. The next generation would include variable thrust propulsion, infrared masking, satellite resistance, and full-spectrum autonomous targeting. Ukrainian commanders understood. This wasn't just about winning battles. It was about rewriting how navies thought about control of the sea. And in Russia, the political reaction grew darker. Moscow issued statements condemning Ukraine's terror-style sea tactics while ordering sweeping reforms across the Black Sea Fleet. Military academies were given new doctrine packages. Counter-drone units were funded directly by the Kremlin. Surveillance balloons were repositioned. Specialized sonar-equipped corvettes began patrols. The patrol boat incident had changed not just naval posture, but political rhetoric. But beyond the governments and admirals, the crews who fought aboard that Russian Raptor-class boat faced a quieter, personal shift. For them, This wasn't strategy. This was survival. Sailors who once trained to intercept pirates now rehearsed swarm suppression scenarios. Young technicians drilled radar tracking of multiple low-profile targets. The old rules, track missiles, ignore surface noise, were gone. Everything mattered now. As the USS Mount Whitney's conference ended, one conclusion held firm: the maritime battlespace had permanently shifted. The next war, one admiral muttered on his way out, won't be fought ship to ship, it'll be fought signal to signal. Magura V5 had fired the first digital broadside in a new naval era, and it would not be the last. In the days following the Magura strike, analysts, commanders, and crews all reached the same quiet realization: the era of drone swarms had begun, not in theory, but in blood and steel. A patrol boat had become the first test subject. It barely survived. Its systems failed, its weapons struggled, and its crew, through courage and reflexes, managed to save lives, but not the mission. From that moment forward, naval warfare would never be the same. Nations across the globe shifted posture, exercises changed, procurement accelerated, counter-drone systems, once dismissed as futuristic luxuries, became priorities. The balance of power no longer hinged on fleet tonnage or carrier air wings, but on who could outsmart, outcode, and outpace the next wave of unmanned assault. And yet, the story of the Russian Raptor-class boat endures for a deeper reason. Because in those 9 minutes, under pressure, fire, and fear, human decisions still mattered. The officer who ordered damage control, the sailor who pulled his injured crewmate, the engineer who sealed the flooding compartment. Technology may define the battlefield, but it's still humans who must endure it. The next engagement won't wait. Swarm tactics are spreading, nations are watching, algorithms are learning, and the seas are no longer silent. If you believe stories like this matter, and that we must understand modern war before it happens again, subscribe, like, and comment to support the channel.